Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. My name's Kevin Marshall, and I'm here with applications.doctor, which is, if you're not aware, powered by International Dentist Central. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but really happy to be with everybody tonight. I'm just going to ask folks to let me know if they're having any problems hearing me or any problems with the video this evening. Sometimes it does happen. I do see my screen lighting up when I talk, so that's a good sign. But if you do find that you're having any issues or it's sounding weird, just let me know in the chat room and I will check that every so often. I do like to keep an eye on the chat room and the chat box. So I do appreciate everybody coming out tonight. And, welcome to a, thank you so much, by the way, Albana, for letting me know that you can hear me. So welcome to another workshop that we're having this evening on the topic of applications. This is the time of year where we discuss applications from anything from statement of purpose topics to CVs, letters of recommendations, supplemental essay questions, and overall just general candidacy questions. During the rest of the year, we do talk a lot about specific things such as bench test preparation, interview preparation here at International Dentist Central. But and what we find is when we do workshops around those topics, a lot of people who don't happen to have upcoming bench tests and or interviews, they have an issue in the sense that they want to know about general candidacy questions, not about those particular topics. We don't always have time to address those in those workshops. So this evening is an opportunity to do that. Now, I just wanted to again just check with everyone that everyone's able to hear. Some people say they are able to hear me and see me. I'm just going to do a quick check of the YouTube video, make sure that it's coming through. So pardon the sound, one moment. Yeah, I could hear myself, I could see myself through the video. If you're having trouble, you might want to refresh your page. That might be one option. What should happen is you have a YouTube video box to your left of this chat box. And if you're having any trouble, you might refresh that page and try playing that because the video should play. So I do appreciate those of you who are coming for the first time. If you are coming for the first time and you're new to International Dentist Central or applications.doctor, one of those two, welcome. We are a group of folks that has worked for many years preparing dentists for U.S. dental programs of various types, and with a big emphasis on international dentists, and that we have helped even those who grow up in the U.S. get into dental programs as well through their applications and through our application editing. But our focus is a lot on the international side of things. And so if you're coming to us from that avenue, we welcome you. We appreciate you coming out and spending time to discuss statements of purpose, which will be our topic tonight. So what I want to say right now is the statement of purpose is one of the most important, if not the most important, piece of your application. And I think that people do underestimate that. I think people, when I say the most important, it's important to note that that is within the realm of the actual documents. If we're talking SOP, we're talking CV, we're talking letters of recommendation, we're talking supplemental essay questions. When you're actually submitting that document to programs, or that let's say that full application to programs, the SOP tends to be one of the more important pieces of the pie, right? It's one of the larger pieces of that pie, bigger slice. by that, I don't mean that your experience, your test scores, your GPAs, like those are less important than they used to be. I think, and arguably, those are more important than the SOP often. But the SOP, or the personal statement, becomes something to help differentiate you when the rest of those things are more on the same level with other candidates. So again, let's think about it this way. Fantastic candidates that are going to have a pretty easy time getting interviews are those with excellent stats, those with excellent and decent and long experience if they have it. If you're an international dentist, that would be practicing dentistry in your home country. For US folks, it might be biomedical stuff or medical related experiences. That would be different, the types of universities you've gone to, the types of grades you've gotten, GPAs, tests that you've taken, especially if those are not required tests, and how you did on those. For international, it's going to be TOEFL. How did you score on that? So you have these different pieces going on, and when you submit that application, those are obviously going to be at the center. That's the first thing they look at before they get into your personal statement or statement of purpose. They're going to be looking at your stats as a candidate. That's of the utmost importance. And usually, what will happen is that they will start deciphering and categorizing people based on their stats initially with that application. That's the first kind of layer of the application review process on their part, on the part of schools and programs. And then they go, after categorizing people based on their stats, then they get into the SOPs. Now, there are some, it's always interesting to me, but there are some candidates that are so impressive stat-wise that the SOP is just an afterthought. So, as long as it's not terrible, we're pretty good to go. We want to interview that person. Doesn't really matter what they wrote unless it's offensive. That's about it. They have to really try to hurt their chances of getting an interview. Other folks, they're more in that maybe, maybe not. They're kind of mediocre in this area. They have that's their experience is kind of strong here. Maybe they did some research assistantship or something like that. It's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll consider them, but other areas are still weak, maybe low GPA. Now they start to say, okay, let's put them in that pile, that kind of medium pile. Let's start looking at the rest of the stuff and what they got. Let's start with their SOP. Let's see what they got. Let's read their personal statement and see what comes out of that. And that's what I want you to have in mind as you're thinking about your applications for next year, is where do you stand as a candidate, and being honest about that with yourself and being real with yourself about where you stand and what it's going to take in terms of crafting your application documents, what it's going to take to give you that competitive edge so that you can get interviews. So I'm going to get into that tonight. We're going to go through, I was originally going to call this workshop the 5 reasons your SOP might not stand out. But as I was doing it, I found all these other reasons, and I got pretty excited. And I was like, I'm going to add another 5 reasons. There's just so many that I have that I'm just going to add some more. So you get double for the same price, right? There's so many things that I want to warn people about, warn applicants about, and some of them as I did some research of this and reviewed previous ones, I realized that, oh yeah, that's something that I should mention. It seemed automatic, and it seemed like common sense to me. But then I was like, a lot of candidates still do these things that I need to warn people about this, because I don't want people to submit this and think they're submitting something that's really fantastic, or they're making the right choice about something, and then it's something that maybe they wish they hadn't done instead. So you guys are, I appreciate, again, those coming who are spending their time with us tonight. We will have time for questions at the end, so if you do have a question, I would recommend putting that in the box, in the chat box, and especially near the end, because that's when we're going to be doing the questions. But you can put it in before. I just may not see it for a little while. But if you do have a question, throw it in there. And I will do my best, like I say, with this workshop tonight, if we have some time, to address some general candidacy questions. Because as I said, during the summertime and the spring and summertime and then early fall, when people are really going to interviews, we really don't have time to really cover these types of questions in our workshops as well, because we really have to focus on those who really need help with the bench test and with interviews and stuff like that. But tonight we'll try to get into those more general topics if we have some time at the end. So we'll have some questions at the end. Let me, before, without further ado, let's get into some of the topic tonight. So I'm just going to switch again my screen over. Just give me a moment. Let's see. Let me just. Okay, let's do this. This little thing happened last time to me. Ah, here we go. Figured it out. Great. All right. So 10 reasons. 10 reasons your statement of purpose, personal statement, might not stand out. So as I mentioned earlier, those of you who know us as International Dentist Central, you still will. We're not going anywhere. We're still International Dentist Central, strong going with that, and we're super excited to continue to announce that. Like, we get emails constantly from candidates just in the past few weeks, even since the last workshop, that that received and let us know about getting acceptances. And so those were folks that worked with us for their bench test preparation, for their interview preparation. Gosh, I mean, there've just been so many this past month, really. I mean, we have someone who just let us know they got into Minnesota, which was exciting. I'm looking through these. UCSF, excellent, good job on. If you're here and you got accepted and you're just joining us for the workshop, even though you don't need to anymore, because sometimes people will tell me that they come to our workshops even after they get accepted. But really, just congratulations to some of these folks. Like someone, again, I won't mention names. I know anonymity is very important in this community, but just who you know who you are. You got accepted to UCSF. You worked with us for bench tests and interviews. Someone got acceptances from all three of UOP, USC, and UCSF. Great job, and difficult schools, and also a pleasant place weather-wise to get accepted. Someone got accepted to USC and UCLA. Fantastic job to that person. Again, you know who you are. And again, these are just ones I'm reading through that we didn't even cover last time. The last time we had a workshop. These are brand new ones that came in. UOP, fantastic job. This person, I believe, worked with us for interviewing, so interview prep, worked with me for that. And I'll just name a couple more. I'm just excited. Congratulations. UOP, another UOP, fantastic. So again, it's just every year we do find that the number of people who write us goes up afterwards, and we love that. We love hearing about people getting in. And these are folks that I want to say real quick. These are many of these folks that I'm even mentioning were folks that also worked with us in editing last year, and there were folks that didn't even have any interviews when we worked with them. Not everyone, but a lot of them didn't have interviews. And we looked at their SOPs and we were like, here's where we think you could improve. And we made some recommendations, and they decided to work with us and started getting some interviews, and then they continued to decide to work with us for their bench test and interview prep, and now they are accepted and they're going to be dentists in the United States. So that's always, to me, this is what makes it exciting. This is what makes doing this worth it. My name is Kevin Marshall. If you don't know me, I work highly on the application side, so the editing side, working closely with our editing team. And I also work closely with candidates for the interview preparation side of things. So if you've got an interview, you'd often talk to me or one of our other interview specialists, but often me, and I do a lot of preparation and coaching with folks to master their interviews. So you might hear about that later on in another workshop. So let's get into the actual reasons. Let's say you are a candidate who applied last year, and you're like, you know what? I applied to 5 schools. I applied to 10 schools. Actually, I talked to 2 candidates in the past 2 weeks that applied to between 7 and 10 schools each. And maybe I think one of them applied to 10, got 1 interview, and another one may have gotten a few more. Or there was actually, no, the other one may not have gotten any. So this is not an uncommon story, and I don't want to single anyone out or make them feel bad. This is not an uncommon story. People will apply to many interviews, to many schools, spend a decent amount of money, right? It can be thousands of dollars. And then they submit their SOP. Often they work with their friend or their spouse, or maybe they have a friend who's a dentist. Or they'll work with, this is kind of interesting too, like they'll work with a recently accepted dental student, and they'll say, I worked with someone who got in, who is also from my home country. They're going to UCLA, or they're going to, Buffalo, so let them edit my SOP, and they will submit that and expect, good stuff, and then unfortunately they don't always get those interviews. And so it depends. I'm not saying that everybody is not a good candidate. There are people who are good to work with, and there are people who are not. And so I want to kind of, just make sure that people don't assume that just because you have a dentist look at your SOP, that person will have a good sense of whether you'll get an interview or not. Because a lot of the times, it's no mystery, but if you're a dentist and you spent the last 10 or 20 years, let's say 5 to 10 years, but a lot of times that people will be a dental assistant for a pretty, let's say, seasoned dentist. Just because someone works as a dentist doesn't mean they're fantastic writers, And to be a writer, to be a great writer is different than being a great reader. So I might be able to look at great literature and read great literature and understand how great it is, or I might be able to look at an SOP and get an idea for how well written it is. That doesn't mean that I can also write it. And so there's a difference between people who can write well and who are good critics. And there's other people who are both bad critics, like they could read an SOP and not know that it's bad, and if they tried to write one, it would be even worse. So there's different categories to this. And for me, I actually happen to be someone who can I can look at SOPs and tell exactly what needs to improve. I can write them, but it's not my favorite thing in the world, and that's why I trust, we work hard, and we've selected a fantastic group of editors that we work closely with here at Applications.Doctor, who are incredible writers who do a much better job executing that writing than I would do. But again, my strength is being able to look at an SOP and see exactly what's wrong with it. So I'm a great critic of SOPs. So in that line, we're going to go over again some of the reasons I think make for SOPs that just don't work. They're not effective. And of course, the first one is the most obvious one. It's bad grammar and poor flow. So this is like, if you can't get this right, it doesn't matter what you write. You could write the most interesting story in the world in your SOP, and you still are very likely not to get any interviews if you have a lot of grammatical errors, because what that tells them, what that communicates to the team who's reading, to the application review committee, is, hey, I don't care enough to bother. I'm a lazy person, or communicates. And I don't want to say that one is necessarily lazy if they have grammatical errors, but it just shows lack of detail, right? And that's not a good trait for a dentist, right? You all are either dentists or becoming dentists or something like that, and lack of attention to detail is not the best quality for a dentist. At least that's not a dentist I want to be going to. So having a bunch of grammatical errors in your SOP or personal statement is a warning sign. It's kind of a red flag, and that's why you use a red pencil to correct it. And I remember when I was reviewing a lot of applications, I would take my red pencil and I would go through and X out a bunch of stuff that was kind of offensive to me. And after about the second grammatical error, maybe I've already decided this person's not even going to get an interview. Like if they can't even decide, if they can't choose the correct version of your, and that could be either Y-O-U-R or as in this picture, Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, and knowing the difference of when to use those two different types of spellings. If they can't figure that out, and if they're not willing to learn, or if they're not willing to have someone review their SOP and fix that, then that tells me they're just not a motivated candidate. They're not taking this very seriously. The other issue is poor flow. Now this is a little less obvious. Now someone can have perfect grammar in their personal statement, but they might have poor flow. And what does that mean, poor flow? It just means that it's just awkward. The way it sounds is just a little incorrect. They might use the wrong word order. They might use a subject before a predicate or a predicate before a subject in the wrong way. So things are just kind of out of order. They don't sound right. And this can commonly happen, actually. What's interesting about this commonly happens when you are writing as a non-native speaker in the language that you're writing for. So if I were to go to a country that speaks English as one of their main languages, let's just take Malta, for example. It's a small little country off the coast of Spain, right? So let's say I go to Malta and I write an essay there. You know, they have influence from mostly they're a British colony from the old days. They're no longer a British colony, but they were for a long time. So they're going to have a lot of British linguistical flow to their language. And they're also going to have some influence from Spain. And so the two coming together are going to create kind of a brand new situation. And if I were to write as an American there, they might review my SOP there and say, you know what, this is odd. It just doesn't sound right for them in that context. And so that can happen for folks that come to the U.S. or Canada, is that their flow is a little strange and things don't sound natural. And that's actually a problem because it's distracting. Because instead of focusing on what you're saying, I'm focusing on the way you're saying it, and that's not good. Then I stop focusing on you anymore as a candidate. You know, there's other little things too, like the choice of words. Again, with a British versus American language, a lot of countries that speak and write in English as one of their main languages get it. Usually, they were influenced from the British style of writing, and so if you're seeing something about ask a question, you can ignore that. By the way, I'm sorry that that's coming up. I don't know why Google's turning that on, but I'm going to turn that off here. Anyway, so if you're living in a country who is influenced by British English, then you might have different spelling for your words. And while Americans or Canadians will process that fine and know the difference, it just kind of makes it stand out again. Now, again, if I were writing for a Canadian dental school, I would use different words than if I were writing for an American dental school, even a few different words. And just a couple of words that come to mind are like color, C-O-L-O-R versus C-O-L-O-U-R, stuff like that. But even between Canada and the U.S. can be different. So make sure your flow is good, and that's an important one. Now let's talk about one of the common things that I see a lot, that I dislike a lot, is the pretentious quote problem. People, I'm sorry for those of you who just wrote your SOP this year and you found the best quote ever, right? You know, I used to think this was okay at the very beginning, and then I started to see how common it was, and it starts to get old. You know, that's the only way I can say it, is people throw a quote up at the top of their SOP, and a lot of times that quote isn't even related to anything in particular. It's not related to dentistry. It's not related to the person. It's just an inspirational quote that sounds nice, like we all should love one another, or something that has nothing to do with what they're talking about, right? So if you're gonna, you know, I'm not going to say if you're going to use a quote. It's up to you if you want to use a quote, but be careful. I've also had candidates submit quotes from people that didn't actually say those things. Like I have in this picture A lot of quotes are attributed to Abraham Lincoln, and they're quotes that he never actually said. Same with the Buddha. No one knows. Very few people actually know what the Buddha said, because the Buddha lived in a community where language wasn't written on paper or any kind of surface for quite a while. I believe it was a few hundred years until they actually were able to write some of the things that the Buddha said, and it was actually just passed down from generation to generation, and people memorized what he said. So it took hundreds of years before any of the Buddha's words actually got on physical paper. And who knows, like who knows when you kind of, it's like the game of telephone. We don't really know how much of that was accurate, right? And same with Jesus, the same thing. Very little of what we actually know he said. There's just people who recall what he said. Some of these great figures in history, whether they're religious or not, we just don't know sometimes what they actually said. And then not only that, but then you add the internet on there, and now we have people attributing things to the Buddha that just don't even sound like something that he would say. There's people that are inspirational speakers from the 1970s that, suddenly their quote, instead of them being quoted or being attributed for that quote, now they've replaced it with the Buddha. And so that's annoying, especially as a reader of applications. I've seen a few applications where I could clearly see that quote wasn't from that person. That's an automatic nick for me. I just cancel that. Like, okay, this person, if I'm reading a bunch of applications and the person doesn't even get that quote right, I'm already annoyed as a reader, because I'm just looking for the best of the best. I'm looking for cream of the crop. Now, let me make sure. Okay, and so if you're going to put a quote, be very, very careful about that. It is considered a gimmick, and make sure that it's highly related to you and your story, not just something to impress people. The other things I would say are gimmicks that are not as common, but there's, one example could be writing a story in the third person, let's say. So let's say I said, there was a young man who grew up, poor and struggling, and then I talk about him throughout, this young boy went to school here and went to school there and learned a lot on his trails, and it's kind of maybe this lovely little fairy tale like story, and then at the end we find out that it's me. Oh, what a surprise. You know what, that is cute the first time you read it as an application reviewer, and after reading a few of those, it starts to get a little old. And it's gimmicks only work once. Let's put it this way. Gimmicks are clever little ways to write your SOP or personal statement that they work the first time an application reviewer will read it, but then the next time they see it, they start to get annoyed, and they're like, come on, let's get to the point of who are you, tell me who you are. And so it's better to just let go of those kind of gimmicks. Another one I've seen, which is really wacky, was one candidate, this is so funny, they put their SOP, the words were shaped in sort of like a tooth or something like that, if I remember, and it was just, they had to use certain shorter words, and then it kind of like the shape of it was in a tooth or something on the page. I don't even know how that translates to entering that into a digital system like Capit. Maybe it works or maybe it doesn't, but either way, it's a bad idea. So be careful with this stuff, and just get to the point. Just stick to the basics if you're not sure what to do. Reason 3, cliche phrases. Now these I want you to know about so that you're more careful to use these kind of phrases. We see these so much, and they mean less and less every time they're used. And when I say cliche, what I'm really getting to is that if you have 100 applicants and 30% of those people, 30% of those applicants are using the same phrases, those phrases start to lose their impact, right? That's the issue. So we have thirst for knowledge. It's a very common personal statement phrase. Thirst for knowledge. It's cute. I mean, it says a lot, right? But it's just so used now. People are using that, even whether in dental school or medical school or law school. Thirst for knowledge, right? Passion. My passion for dentistry. Now, passion for dentistry is probably one of the most common phrases in personal statements that we see. I should probably have somebody on our team do like a word cloud to see what the most common phrases are in all the applications we've received, because that would be fascinating to see what the most common phrases are, and maybe that's a little project I should look into. But basically, my passion for dentistry or passion for dentistry began, and then we begin the story, right? So that's very common, you know. My desire to help others. You know, if you think about, everyone has this desire to help others, but then when you actually get into their story, it's not that convincing. That it is hard to kind of make that connection that you can see as just because someone did some required voluntary community service because their dental school told them to do that. It's not that convincing that that action came from a desire to help others. It may have, you know, for all we know as a reader, it may have just been that they had to. So you really, if you're going to use these phrases, you need to back them up, you know, and be careful when using them also. From an early age, a very common phrase, from an early age, I just was fascinated by teeth, you know. Okay, maybe, but again, these are phrases that a lot of people are using. So other ones, where I attended such and such university, the most prestigious dental school in, usually it's my home country, right? So now, like I say to many people, people will tell me, and the applicants will tell me that they went to the most prestigious dental school. But what I find is interesting is that I have a list of like 5 or 6 dental schools that I've seen that are all the most prestigious one in a particular country. And I'm always like, well, which one is it? Because they can't all be the most prestigious. So that, if I'm seeing that, guess what? The programs are seeing that too, and they start to become a little less sensitive to that phrase, the most prestigious dental school. If you're going to talk about the prestige of the dental school, get into why, get into what made it prestigious, you know. And then finally, again, one of the more common themes or one common stories that I see is the brother or the sister, etc., breaking their tooth when they were 7 years old. The trip to the dentist, and how impactful that was, that made you decide to become a dentist. We talked about that last time a little bit, and you know, I'm not going to get too much into that, but throwing that out there again, becoming very cliche. It's become very cliche. It's actually not becoming anymore. It is simply cliche in this particular field of those who are planning on becoming either dentist or U.S. dentist. Everyone seems to have a story like that. I don't know. Yeah. So reason 4, bragging and arrogance. Now, the truth is that what I see too much of is people bragging about using braggy kind of words and arrogant kind of phrases in their personal statement, but not really being able to convince the reader that they are this genius that they say they are. And you really want to be careful of that. You know, if you're going to brag subtly and tastefully, and show instead of tell. So instead of saying I'm an incredible dentist or I'm an incredible student, show them that with proof of your grades, proof of your awards that you've won, or recognitions that you've been given by the dean, or whatever like that. Those are ways to show that you're that genius that you say you are, instead of just saying I was an incredible student, I was the best student out there, you know, if you are genuinely top of your class, that's one thing. But if you're just saying I was one of the most I was one of the best students in my class, you know, I mean, that's very generic, right? We don't really know if that's true or not, and we might be able to tell through other stuff, but it's stuff that doesn't really come across that well. And also, just in general, bragging and that arrogant tone, it's hard to pull off and really get away with it. I've seen a few people do it, but they really were impressive people. They were, if not, they were just impressive candidates, they were impressive people overall. And so if you are on paper looking like a lot of other candidates, you're kind of that, you know, as I mentioned in our last workshop, you're kind of in that range where you're coming across the application review committee as a medium level candidate, and you're claiming that you are incredible in all those ways, without being able to back that up, then bragging just comes across, it's disappointing, and it's sort of just annoying, and you just kind of want to toss that SOP, right? So be careful of bragging, especially if you can't back it up. Now we have number 5, which is unremarkable experiences and interests. And by remarkable, I mean things that really stand out and make you go, wow, that's different. That's cool. So instead of what people will write about, and when I put this list here, please don't take this as I'm not impressed or I'm not grateful that you have these things. It's wonderful for you to have all these things. In fact, I expect it to some degree. I expect you to have at least some of the things on this list. If you have all of them, wonderful. But are you really going to take the precious space that you have in your SOP or personal statement and write in detail about things that everyone else, that many, many other candidates have, and probably everybody has to some level? It's hard for me to find a candidate these days that hasn't partaken in a demo camp. So do you really want to spend 2 paragraphs writing in detail about the demo camp experience? Especially if it's a pretty common experience there. I mean, if you saw some really gruesome or tragic things that blew your mind, okay, that might be worth a story. But if you just helped, bring some tools and some instruments, and you basically just kind of wrote people's names down in the logbook. I mean, if you're just doing unremarkable activities, don't write 2 paragraphs about that story. Let's get on with it. Find something else to talk about. Community service. Yeah, everyone has. I rarely find a candidate that hasn't done community service. So again, if you're going to talk about the stuff, it should blow my mind. It shouldn't just be run-of-the-mill stuff. A required post-BDS internship, very common in candidates. Some countries don't require that after a BDS, but many do. So going into all the different types of treatments, I've had candidates in the personal statement go through all the list of very general treatments that they administered as associate dentists in their home country. It's again, we're not using our precious content, these precious paragraphs, effectively when we're going down that route. Dental assisting, same thing. Saying phrases like, I learned, what would it be, like, this experience taught me what it was like to be a dentist in the US. That is, that's what every dental assistantship should be for international dentists, right? So what else do you have to say about it? So anyway, these are some of the things. Pass part 1, part 2, great. Don't need to talk about that. They already see that in your application. So these are things that we just don't need to restate. They're already stated. They're expected. And why waste that precious and valuable space with that? Stating the obvious, kind of a continuation of the past. These are phrases that, like, duh, right? Where I provided excellent dental care to patients. Well, that's very generic. I don't even know what that means. Like, for you, excellent dental care could be not causing them permanent damage. And for another person, it could mean administering a treatment that never needs to be redone again. So there's a kind of a large spectrum of what excellent dental care means. So those kind of phrases are not very descriptive. They don't really tell us that much, and they're obvious. If you don't plan on doing that, then why are you even a dentist? I'm interested in becoming a dentist. Why are you even using those phrases? Like, we know that if you're not interested in becoming a dentist, you shouldn't be submitting an application. So these are precious. We have so much space. We have so many words to work with. Really try to refrain from stating the obvious. School was challenging. It should be, right? We hope it is. My name is, your name's on the application. There's no need to state that. I'm interested in your program. Yes, we know that. Again, these are the things that I want people to really think about. Is they're easy to write because we don't know what else to write. And I get it. Like the first draft, go ahead and write this stuff because it helps kind of get the flow of your writing out. You need to just get stuff on paper. No problem. So go ahead and do this in your first draft. But in your second draft, as you review that first draft, remove these phrases that are obvious. And if you can ask the question, well, should they know that anyway, or can they safely assume that? Then you can probably remove that. But I do want people to think about these things when they're writing their SOP, because they just don't make an impact on the reader, and they don't make me want to bring you in for an interview, right? If I'm an application reviewer. Nor if I'm a professor at a program do they make me want to say, I want to work with this candidate. I want to work with this student, you know. All right, I want to talk really quick about applications.doctor. We actually have 4 more tips and reasons to go, so we're not done yet. But I do want to quickly talk about our new system because I'm really excited about it. Applications.doctor is a new website, it's a new system, and I'm confident that it will really be able to fulfill the needs of international dentists, of dental perspectives, you know, dental school perspectives, those who are interested in going to dental school, and be able to provide them some really informative and hand-holding type of guidance for their application and application preparation. So whether that be, again, the CAPA system or another system, our new system, it's really dedicated to helping dentists with their dental school applications. 3 easy steps. You go to the site, you browse our editors, and we are actually in the process of bringing over, you know, we used to work under the name of International Dentist Central for editing. Again, we still use that. You know, the International Dentist Central will still help people with their interviewing, with their bench test preparation. We're still here. We're going to be helping you all year long next year. But we've decided to pull the editing out from International Dentist Central so that we can really focus on it and let some of our team members give it the attention it needs and the experience it needs for chemists who go through this process. So we are bringing, we have more editors, and we're actually populating their profiles right now, those who we've worked with this past year who have helped so many candidates get interviews. And so we're actually populating that list right now. But you go on there, you find the editor, you review their testimonials and words that have been said about them from past clients. You choose a package for you that works. You know, if you've worked with us before, it's a similar system in that sense. You choose the ones that make sense. And, you know, for some people, they want tons of help, and for others, they just want the basics. And so we have a core version, and we have a full package where we really get in there and give you a lot more one-on-one coaching and also review of your documentation by multiple eyes, you know, in the process. That also includes LORs, letters of recommendation, supplements, supplemental essay questions, etc. And then step 3, you start working together. You meet with your editor one-on-one using Skype, or Skype or another system, and you talk about your experience. You provide them information that maybe you didn't put in your initial draft SOP or your the last SOP you submitted, and you guys work together to come up with some of an SOP that avoids some of the things we're talking about tonight, avoids those cliches, avoids the blandness of most personal statements, and really gets into making this something that turns heads, something that makes the reader wake up. You know, maybe they've read 10 applications just in the past 2 hours and they're getting a little sleepy. They see yours and boom, oh, that's what we want to happen. And that's what the process is about, is having our editors really work with you to provide you that guidance and also to just get those words right. We do a lot of restructuring of your SOP. When you give us your draft, we pull things apart, we remove things, we rewrite things for you. You rewrite whole paragraphs sometimes. So we really are not a passive group of editors. We really get in there and are much more aggressive to help folks because we know that that's what makes the difference. And then step 4, you apply, you get those interviews, and you interview, you pass those bench tests if you need to, and you succeed. And this is what we do every year, and we see people every year get to this stage that we help from the beginning to the end. And we're so happy when that happens, and we're so just a lot of gratitude about that. I can't tell you like how much it makes my day. This past month, I've been getting so many emails that people have got accepted, and my day really just gets lifted up every time I see that, and I'm so happy. So yeah, and this is a real picture of USC. I think this is an older class from maybe early 2010s or something like that. But this is really what it's all about. We're going to go into a little more applications .doctor down the road, but I want to just kind of expose you to that. This is, again, our new system, our new site that we've launched, and we are in operation, and we're pretty excited about that. So let's get back and finalize the last 3 reasons why it's possible your application, your SOP, didn't catch that much attention, didn't maybe it was passed on when it was reviewed this past year, or maybe it might be if you submit what you have right now. I want you to take a good hard look at yours. If you have never applied before and you've written your SOP and you're about to send these applications into some of the schools that are opening right now, or still open, I mean, and you're making some of you're making some of these mistakes, I want you to really look at this and say, am I doing any of these, and do I need to review this? So you have, again, I find this is true. Again, different countries have different linguistic rules, right? So you have some countries that speak English as one of their main languages, where it's a much more formal way of speaking, right? For whatever reason, maybe it's coming from the British system or something like that, British influence. But for whatever reason, the choice of words, especially when it's written, especially the written language, becomes extremely formal. And in the US, we toned that down a lot. You know, we as a country, we took some of the British rules and we made them much more down to earth. We let go of a lot of the formalities. So if you're in a workplace environment, maybe in England, and I don't think this is as true anymore, but it used to be 25, even 25, 30 years ago in England, if you were at a workplace environment, you would address people as Mr., Mrs., Doctor, and that would be if you were colleagues with them. We sometimes do that, but even in settings such as dental school, where 2 professors are working together, they might just call each other by their first names in the United States, whereas in England they might not. They might still call each other by Dr. So-and-so. Now that may be the case as well here. There might be cases as well where people use doctor. But again, a lot of formalities have been stripped down in the US in general, even in academia and higher academics. So we want to find the right balance. We don't want to get too formal, but we also don't want to get too informal. So also, there's a lot of fluff that can happen with formal writing, and it's just a waste of words and a waste of time. So one example, it is with great pride and deep respect that I hereby do. So we can get rid of like most of these words, right? You could just say, if you really want to get the pride and respect thing, it gives me great joy to apply. I've just cut that down quite dramatically. I have such respect for this program, and it's exciting for me to apply would be another way that's less, it's not as short, it's not shorter, but it's less formal. You know, those kind of phrases become a little too formal, they're a little too over the top, I guess I would say. Your illustrious and most prestigious university. We don't need to get into these overly dramatic, I would call these sort of melodramatic phrases that don't really help us that much. They just sound almost like we're, pardon the phrase, they're almost like kissing butt, right? They're just not, they're too much, too intense. Just like, let's calm down here. I sincerely hope that the graduate committee of XSS University deems my application worthy of full consideration. Again, we shouldn't be, we shouldn't be imagining these kind of phrases coming off of a Shakespearean play. You know, they should be down to earth. They should be getting to the point, focusing on saying more strong, decisive statements instead of just kind of fluffy words that whirl around in our heads. The other alternative, I should say, to be careful of is going into the slang. I've seen a few candidates do that where they try to be relatable, maybe. I don't know what it is. You know, going to a school would be tight. Spend time working I was spending time, I did read this one time, I spent time as a dentist doing badass work. So that's not appropriate. You know, that's strange to just say, and again, what does that even mean? It's just trying to be too edgy there. Now we've gone into the other direction. Most of the time, though, I see the opposite. I see the former. I see people with too formal a wording, too formal linguistics again. So I want people to kind of think about, and you know, you can read newspaper articles here and just get an idea for the current kind of um, the current writing trends that you see in the American culture that's going on. Those are totally fine to go with. Week opening. Now this is important. I put this image of a hook because we call this an opening hook, right? So everyone's familiar with it, whether you know the terminology or not, but you need to have a good hook at the beginning of your personal statement. It needs to be inviting, it needs to be interesting, and it needs to get you satiated, meaning not satiated, it needs to get you salivating, I should say. Excited to hear what's next. I want to read what happens to this person. Again, it can't be gimmicky, but it needs to be authentically interesting. And so, you know, sometimes it is a story. Sometimes usually is it a story of some kind that we usually find helps because people do like stories, but we have to be careful of which stories. You know, using that one that I mentioned before, where your brother or sister had a dental problem. If that is such a common story, which it is that really going to hook the attention of these fish? No. So we want to use you want to use a hook that has some delicious looking bait on there that says, you know what, pay attention to me as a candidate. I want I'm gonna provide you an interesting read right now, and you're gonna have an enjoyable few minutes. That's a promise that we want to state in the initial opening statement, but we also want to make sure we're delivering on that, because if we fall off after that and the first paragraph is interesting and the rest of it is drab, we're going to lose that reader again. So a weak opening is one of the reasons people just, there were times where if we looked at their stats, if we looked at a candidate's stats, we have like 100 applications to go through in a day or something, or 2 days. We look at their stats, they're already not looking good. Things are pretty murky for this candidate. We start reading the paragraph, it's the same cliche stuff that we're tired of. You know what, I might scan through and see if there's anything interested, but I'm not going to spend more than a minute or so looking at that personal statement. Whereas a good one that I'm looking at that really captures my attention, I might spend 4 or 5 minutes reading that. So that's the difference that we want to make sure that we're getting that reader to be excited about what we're talking about. One of the biggest mistakes, saving those for the end, is blah, 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 let me put my resume or CV in paragraph form. So I have nothing else to say. I have no theme. I have nothing really defining myself as a candidate. Let me just start from the top of my CV and work my way down to the present and tell you everything about dentistry that I've done or related to medical, anything medical, anything dental related or whatever. We'll just go through the whole gambit of my CV, and I'll write it up for you in minute detail, even though everyone else has done the same kind of things before in their experiences. So, bad idea. I see this so much. So many people do this, and they basically just run through their entire dental-related experience for these dental programs, and so it just doesn't work. And it just doesn't work very well. Try to find some other ways to go. I want to say too that well, I'll just go into this one. Reason 10, yawn. It's ultimately, this is what kills most SOPs, is that it's just not that interesting. And this one incorporates many of the things we've talked about already, the past other 9 reasons. Is it incorporates some of those, and it just becomes a personal statement that we just forgettable. And so I've, kind of an intense picture here of people that have barcodes. There's nothing really interesting. Barcodes are not that exciting, right? They're just numbers. And basically you just become, candidate ID number 685, after 10, if I've read your personal statement, this happened to me quite a lot. I remember sort of the test, right? Sort of the metric. If I read your SOP and then I continue reading others, or maybe I don't even, maybe I go to lunch, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, you say to me, oh, Kevin Marshall, what did you think about his essay? What would you say was the thing that really stood out to you? And if I think to myself, I don't remember anything about it. They just kind of all blend together with the other ones. I can't remember anything about the candidate. I can't sum you up as a candidate in 2 or 3 words. I don't feel any emotion about you. I'm pretty unexcited, pretty indifferent. and I mix you up with other candidates and just say, was that the one who went to, had some research, or is that the one that was a dental assistant? I can't remember. If that's what I'm feeling, and that's the reaction that I have about you, and of course this doesn't work. I mean, you can't really take this test and put it out. You can't just give this to a friend and say, what do you think? Do you remember my SOP? I mean, you could, but chances are they will remember because they have only read your personal statements. So they'll remember more likely about you. This is especially the case when you're talking to people who read applications all day long. And so this is just me giving you that kind of insider track information that as someone who's read a lot of applications, both for dentists and in other fields, if I could not remember a candidate's personal statement or opening, I probably wasn't that excited about them, and they probably didn't impress me. I'd have to basically now rely on their stats to make up for that, or if their stats weren't good, I'd probably just toss them, and then I don't think so, maybe next year pile. And that's not where you want to be. And so this is these things are very important. A lot of people, they just throw something together, write a bunch of stuff out. It's very fluffy. It kind of says very little overall. It fills up the word count's there, but there's not much else there. And so that's what people turn in, and then they wait and they wonder why why they're not getting anything back. And that's why we do these workshops, is to give people that insight. So those are my 10. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure you might have a few, but I just want to bring those up to you so you think about them. Now, we do help people with applications. We do help people with their SOP, their personal statement. And so again, $50 off is a current winter special we're running, just because we want people to get started early. Now, the thing is, people do eventually come to us each year, and we're happy to help them, but it does make it a little harder when everybody comes at the same time. So we're trying to encourage people to get started early. It's good for us, and it's good for them. It's good for everybody. That means that you get a little more time with us. We can really focus on you because not everybody is coming at the same time. And so when things get really busy in the years past, sometimes we've had to say no to folks at a certain point, to say we've reached capacity, we can't help any more folks. We don't want to get there with you. We would like people to get started early. And you know what? Getting started early also benefits you in the sense that often, if you are one of the early applicants to a program, no one will ever say this. No school will ever say it, but schools just happen to be a little more interested at the beginning. They have their attention span isn't kind of burnt out already. So if you're one of the first 10 applications that they're reading for the year, chances are you're going to be given a little more weight and excitement than if you're the 230th, right? If they've read tons of applications and they get to yours, and it's May now, and it's gonna take a little more to excite them. So I think this benefits everybody in general. So you can always learn more about that at applications.doctor and learn about our process. You're always welcome to let us know. And actually, down below the video, you can, if you're interested, you can sign up for a session with one of our team members here at applications.doctor, and we'll talk about your candidacy in general. I'll give you an idea of what we think about your SOP as it is right now, whether you have whether you've applied or not and submitted that yet or not. As long as you have a draft SOP, we want to look at that, and we can tell you what we think about it. Tell if you're making some of these mistakes. So anyway, we're going to wrap up soon. I do want to quickly see if there's any questions, and let's just quickly go in. And if you have any more, feel free to add those. Let me just see. So quickly, someone says, even if you only pass the MBE part, I'm sorry, I guess MBE, do they know your score? Denise is asking this. I don't believe they do know your score anymore. What they know is whether you pass or not. And so I say I'm like 90-something% sure about that they do not know your score. They just know that you passed. And that is, that's by intention. If they knew your score, then it wouldn't just be pass-fail anymore. It'd be score-based, right? So the only thing they're giving to that school is a pass-fail, and that's why it's important to pass. I know that, I want to say real quickly that there are candidates out there who have had to pass, so taken a few times to pass their part 1 or part 2. That's okay. It doesn't mean it's over for you at all. It just means you have to do more work. You have to have more of an incredible SOP or personal statement. So, and that goes true with any of these tests, stat, whatever it is. If you need to take these things again, these exams again, it just means you're gonna have to work a little harder in the application process, and it's gonna be a bit harder for you, but I have seen people do it. But just make sure that if you're somebody who hasn't taken them yet, take it seriously. Take these tests seriously, again, whether they're the DIT or whether they're NBD, TOEFL. I mean, TOEFL is not a big deal. You can retake that a lot of times, all the time, actually. So just make sure that you're taking these things seriously, though, so you don't have to retake them. I've seen people recommend a storytelling approach. For example, starting an SOP, I've quickly scanned the clutter table. All I had was all I was going to have. Stethoscope slung around my neck, the dirty nostalgic tube, and my shaking hands, and the SOP goes like this. Is this a good approach? You know, that's a nice beginning. I'm now curious. I want to know what's going to happen. What are you talking about? Kind of there's a bit of mystery there. So, you know, I can't say that it's a bad approach. Keep it going, you know. Make sure that the rest of it follows. I've heard numerous times, do not repeat things already mentioned in your CV. Great. And what should we do? So what should we exactly write in our recipe? Well, there's no rules, right? There's not a should, you should write about this. A lot of people actually think that you need to write about why you became a dentist. Some people think you need to write, again, some specific event of your dental journey. You can do these things. There's not a yes or no. It depends on the person, it depends on the situation. There are some people that I think it's worth talking about why they became a dentist because it's interesting. There's others who it's not worth it because it's not interesting. So really it depends on you. I hate to say that. I know that people hate a response that says it depends, but it really does depend in that sense. And we really would have to, you know, that's exactly why we do this kind of coaching with people, because we have to talk to them one-on-one and figure out what is it about you that stands out, and let's get into that and see how we can make that exciting to read. How many CE courses do you recommend to include in the CV? Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. I don't have a major issue with putting around 10, maybe more, but if it starts to get to a whole page of them and they're all kind of just there, I mean, you know, I actually don't even care that much, as long as there's some other good stuff and you're not trying to make it, some people try to make it as if it's the equivalent of like a master's program or something like that. Like, oh, I did this C course and it's incredible, and but it's only a 2-hour course. So like, just, they have a place, you know, there's a section, put them in the section, however many you got, throw them in there. I don't really have a particular limit on that. I just don't want people to try to make them bigger than they are and assume that they're going to carry the same weight as other things. And then Paranita asked, is it advisable to write in very simple words? Well, I wouldn't say it's about trying to dumb it down. What I would say is just write more directly. So I could say, the chicken crossed the road. That gets to the point. Or I can say, the chicken thought about whether he or she would cross the road and looked back at his past and then decided, maybe I don't know, maybe I will cross the road. You know, we want to simplify in that way. So maybe it's not simple words, but it may be simplifying our words or simplifying our phrases so that things are a little more direct. Unless they need to be. I mean, if you're really going in, if you're adding adjectives to a story to make it exciting, that's a different story. But a lot of people will just write formal things that don't really add to my understanding of what you're saying. They're just complicating the word structure, but they're not really adding anything valuable, and that's what I have an issue with. And Sonia asked, does the number of attempts of MBD influence our chances for selection in a dental program? They can. And again, I want to say that they can, and that can also, it can, what should I say? It can be a little roadblock for an application, for an applicant, and it might reduce the number of invitations they get, but it doesn't eliminate them in most cases, especially if you have a good SOP and you have to overcome You have to work and use your SOP to overcome some of those flaws that people have in their candidate, in their application. Grabbing some water here. Sahi asked, do you have any tips on how to cover up gaps for about a year after BDS? There's many ways to do that, and a year is not too long. What I might consider doing is, it depends. It just depends, of course, on the situation. There are people that I've seen, and I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but there are people that I've seen talk about what they did do during that year, and as long as it's something that seems to add to their candidacy as an interesting aspect, it made them a more interesting person, or it gave them a new context of seeing the world or practicing, that could be positive. Let me just switch back. I'm sorry to I forgot that I had my presentation open. But anyway, it's kind of boring. Look at the same slide over and over. But that year, did it have any? And you don't have to answer right now. You can talk later. But did it have any ramifications? Did it affect who you were? Did it affect your career? And did it change things? Might be worth talking about, and it may not be. So it's just, again, it depends on the situation. We have to really look and see if it's interesting enough to include, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's better just to leave that stuff out, and then you talk about it during the interview. That's another tactic. What is the statistical average of success for those who partake in their course? I really don't get into that, Denise, because it wouldn't be a true mark of us, just because every candidate is different and they have different strengths and weaknesses to their candidacy. So we could do the best job in the world, make the most interesting SOP for them, and if they have enough problems in their candidacy, they still may not get an interview. So what we like to say is, a great SOP doesn't guarantee you an interview, but a bad SOP can certainly get you thrown out and not get you an interview. So I have seen more likely people who had fantastic SOPs, but they have major candidacy obstacles. Sometimes it still doesn't always work, but it's your best shot. It's the way to think about it. It's like, well, if you got those things, you can't do anything about them now. You can't do anything about the part 2 you took 3 or 4 times, but you have, if you still want to play the game, you got to do your best, and that's why we really don't get into that the success rates, because it's just like, it wouldn't be a fair thing. Well, what I can say instead, though, is so many candidates come to us. This is the typical story. They come to us like, the last year, the year before, I applied to 10 schools. I didn't get anywhere. I don't know. Do you guys think you can help me? Sure, we can help you. We work with them. We talk to them around often April. They let us know, hey, I got interview calls. And we hear them throughout the summer. I got another interview call. They'll email us and let us know. We're really excited to get those. And this is a very just common, typical story. If there's a candidate who we can't help get interviews, and for whatever reason they're not getting interviews, it's more often that they have these obstacles in their candidacy. You have to think about it this way too, is most candidates don't try that hard. And so, I hate to say it, they just don't. Even after these workshops, they come to a few workshops, they still don't try very hard. They still don't get any help with their SOPs. They still write it out, I'll do it myself, and they submit that. So again, it doesn't always, this little secret, industry secret, it doesn't take always that much. We don't have to write the best novel ever written for you. We don't have to write the best personal statement in the world. We write an incredible one, but it doesn't have to be winning any Pulitzer Prizes. And it just takes effort, and people just don't always get that. But it still has to be interesting, and a lot of people will just make these mistakes, and a lot of people just refuse to get any help, and that's fine. If you're a good writer, there's no problem. You don't need us, and we're not trying to. I'll often talk to people who will meet with me, and I'll look at their SOP and I'll say, you know what? There's nothing I would do differently. Use that. I'm not here to try to get people to partake of anything that they don't need, and I don't even want to spend time with people that already have a great SOP. So that's not what we're about. Okay, so yeah, Pooja. Third attempt pass. It's not over for you. There's other things that we would want to look at. It is going to be challenging, but I don't want that to discourage you, because we have helped people get both interviews and acceptances. So it just makes it a little harder, and that's part of the game of this. But don't give up is what I would say, is really make sure that you've tried and given it your all. And someone asks about a personal statement where they had an abusive marriage leading me to decide to pursue dentistry. That's interesting, and it's also what I would call sort of like a risk, right? So there's always a risk with things that are like this, where it could pay off and it could backfire. So there's two possibilities there, right? So sometimes these personal things, especially if there's abuse or if there's things like that you've overcome personally, it can, to take that risk can benefit. It can, if it's done effectively and it's written effectively, it can have the effect of being an inspirational story where the person really feels like, wow, this person went through a lot and they overcame a lot, and I want to give them a chance. But I've also had other folks where I've read their SOP and doesn't work. It's not working. It's not effective. And as a reader, you get the feeling like, oh, this person's just trying to use this to get my sympathy. And the moment that a reader feels like it's a tool to try to get some sympathy and give me a chance, then they just throw it to the side. And so it really is touchy. And when I say this, I don't mean to be so robotic about it. Like, what you went through is very noble, and I have the highest respect for what you went through, because it sounds like a very difficult time, and it's not easy to pull out of stuff like something like that. So again, total respect for that. But I'm just giving you my experience with some of these kind of stories that are similar. And we have had, I do remember a candidate that had some abuse from their background, and we worked carefully with this person to come up with a way of expressing that in a relatively subtle way, focusing on the things she overcame. And she got some great interviews that year. She got some good, and she got in as well. So that was probably 2014, I think. So yeah, so I mean, it can work, and it just depends again on how it's done, how it's executed. So okay, so we're running out of time right now, and I really do appreciate people's wonderful questions. It's such a joy to see people out. I really do appreciate that. Those who are participating tonight, those who asked these questions. I'm just going to answer about a minute more, and then we're going to wrap up. How do I and my wife make an SOP if we're both dentists? Well, it's about me and my wife. I mean, I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, you both have to kind of take the same approach, and you both have to find your own unique things. I mean, I would be careful of interweaving your two experiences too much, because having a husband and wife can be attractive sometimes for a dental program, and sometimes it can be unattractive. And it depends on the program, and it depends on how it's discussed. It's not uncommon, but my sense with this stuff is that it doesn't really make a big difference to them whether you have a dentist wife or husband who is also interested in a program. It doesn't really make it it doesn't make you any more interesting to them. What they care about is the individual. So really focus, I would say, just on your individual stories first and foremost. And don't try to use my spouse wants to as well as any. It's not going to really help you, I would just say. It's not going to hurt you, though. Okay. So what I want to do, I want to thank everybody, and just say we will be having more of these workshops. I want to do next time, which I'm excited about. I'm going to put out an email maybe in the next week or so, an opportunity for people to submit their SOP for the next workshop. And for those of you who are gutsy and brave, I'm going to take a few. I'm not going to take that many. But what I'll do is basically similar to what I do in the free editing consult, where I will take it and I will give feedback about it. Give honest feedback about what I think from the perspective of someone who reads tons of dental school essays, dental school personal statements, and I want to do kind of like a live review of them. And so know that you'll be completely anonymous. I'm not going to expose you or anything like that. We will remove any names from it, and you can do this too if you want. You can remove any names, but we will also do another check and remove any names or any, like I'll remove the university name, I'll remove like anything that could possibly identify you. And we'll just kind of focus on the content itself and what we would do differently. And so we're going to look forward to doing that. So again, look out for an email if you're interested in that and having your SOP personal statement be reviewed, again, anonymously for the entire community. And we'll learn a lot. I think we'll learn a lot about what makes a great SOP and what aspects would be worth looking at and changing. And you'll just get an idea for how we work too, and how we address and approach personal statements and specifically. And then we'll also do some workshops down the road related to CVs. We'll do some related to letters of recommendation. We'll do some other ones maybe about supplemental questions. So we'll have a bunch coming up in the next few months. So do stay tuned for that. If you're not on our email list, please join. And there's a way to do it. Just go to applications.doctor, and you can click on the button right below this video. There's a little button, get a free editing consult. That'll take you to applications.doctor. You can join on the front page. There's a little box to put your email. So join our list if you're not a part of that already. And then if you want to have your application reviewed and we can look at your documents and see where they are, we offer a free 15-minute consult. So you can do that anytime you want. So, all right, we allow one session per person. So please make sure to have everything. Hopefully you have everything kind of written up and ready to go. Or at least you have a draft. That's fine. So thank you all for coming out. I'll let everybody go. Have a great night. And thank you for your time. Bon voyage. Take care.